It's Gujarat on top when it comes to ease of doing business. The first ever survey on reform progresses made by state governments and conducted by the centre along with the World Bank ranks Prime Minister Narendra Modi's home state #1 in terms of business friendliness, followed by Chandrababu Naidu's Andhra Pradesh. While that may be more or less in line with expectations, what has surprised many is the rise of Jharkhand to the 3rd spot and Chhattisgarh at #4 in terms of ease of doing business.
While an industry-friendly Maharashtra has been pushed to the 8th position, Tamil Nadu, believe it or not, which is home to some of the top-notch multinational companies, doesn't even figure in the top 10 list. The World Bank survey, which measures reform measures undertaken by states on a 98-point scale, finds that no state is in the leader position just yet, implying that a lot needs to be done at the ground level. Top honchos from corporate India insist that unless the government moves quickly on land and labour reforms, all the talk on ease of doing business will remain just that. The key takeaways from the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report, what it means for Indian industry and global giants willing to put in and park their top dollar in India, is our top story right here in Business Tonight.
Contracts, clearances, land allotment, construction permit, tax procedure, labour regulation are just some of the many things that make it easy for businesses to flourish in India and anywhere else in the world. According to the latest ratings by the World Bank on State of States, Gujarat leads the pack as the easiest state to do business in. With a score of 71.14%, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh are among the first 5 too. This report assesses implementation status of 98-point reform measures across various parameters like setting up a business, allotment of land and obtaining construction permit, complying with environment procedures, complying with labour regulations, obtaining infrastructure-related utilities, registering and complying with tax procedures, carrying out inspections and enforcing contracts. The aim of this exercise was to assess various factors that enable the ease of doing business in each state and to compare the states.
There was no notion of this comes from the center, why wouldn't we be interested? Every state and union territory acknowledged that it is important to improve the business climate and try to implement reforms.
A move expected to boost competitive federalism and encourage states to carry out reforms to woo the big bucks.
It's important to remember that in areas such as land acquisition and labour reforms, where the Modi government has been stumped by the opposition, it is important for states to take the lead. But ultimately, it all boils down to political appetite and will for economic reforms. Neha Sethi, ET Now, New Delhi.
So what really are the lessons to be learnt by states who are falling behind? Should only centre be held responsible for India's poor ranking in the ease of doing business across the world? We are joined by two very special guests. Amitabh Kant, the Secretary in the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, and of course Sunil Munjal, the Joint MD of Hero MotoCorp. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for being with us this evening. Mr. Kant, because you've been a part of this exercise, you've been a part of how states stack up really. Just to ask you, what kind of insight does this ranking really throw up at this stage?
I think the important thing is that it's a very analytical, very professional and a very thorough and rigorous analysis done by the World Bank. What it truly brings out is that there are several states which are around 70% ranking. There are several states which are around 60% ranking. We need to make them jump up to about 90%. There are several states which are lagging behind, and we need to take them to around 60%. And states, I think, this provides the template for them to understand which parameters they're very good at and which parameters they need to make a further improvement on. So it brings in this huge competitive spirit among states.
Right. Mr. Munjal, come in then. What's the criteria and the basis of which these rankings have been issued really?
You must also remember that most of the criteria that has been assessed in this report is to do with small and mid-sized enterprises. So how do you grow the investment? How do you create more job opportunities? How do you create more entrepreneurship in small and mid-sized enterprise is very, very critical for India going forward. If we are to create the millions and millions of new jobs that we need every year, they can only come if all types and all sizes of industry are growing. The large industry tends to have more capability to take care of itself. So this is very, very useful for the micro, small and mid-sized enterprises.
Right. Let's look at the top 4 there, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh. Mr. Kant, what are the basic things that the top 4 states rank high in, Gujarat, AP? What is it that they've got right?
Well, I think the important thing that they've done is that they've made it extremely, extremely easy for people through the life cycle of business. It's not just about starting business, but you come across government touch points all through your life cycle. And you need to provide easy government facilitation across the life cycle. Entry, exit, closure, labor laws, everything together. Now, Gujarat is an example of why it has done well, is simply because it has made itself easy across the life cycle. I think in the case of Andhra Pradesh, they've managed to do this very, very smoothly now. And in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, they've made a big, big jump. They have brought in radical changes in the last 5 to 6 months, largely on account of this study, and therefore they have jumped up several notches.
You know, one of the crucial things that I was going through in this report, and then I actually found, Mr. Munjal, is it's not just about starting up a business that should be easy. How crucial then are easier laws to wind up when things go wrong? I mean, that is something that India Inc. has been struggling with for a while.
So the criteria that industry has been talking about, as you know, we have a task force set up in CII on ease of doing business, and the government has also set up a commission, I think, or a task force to look at this. So we have said there should be 3 different areas that we should focus on. One is starting up a new business to make it easy and make it simple. Second is to operating an existing operating business. How do you make it easy for them? And third, God forbid, if any company needs to shut down, how do you make that shutdown the least painful and allow the reuse of the energy, resource, people, assets of that enterprise which is not run well, for whatever reasons, internal or external, but the assets can get productively used back into the economy. And all 3 criteria are equally important, and that is what we have gone back to the government with. We've actually given a set of recommendations of what we believe should be done and how it could be done in phases as well.
Fair point indeed. So it's not really just about ease of doing business in India anymore, as we've been tracking for years now. It's actually about ease of doing business in particular states. The question, Mr. Munjal, is how does one really, woo the top dollar then? Because every state is going to be different, and India, of course, is a medley of all those states there.
So there are 2 things. One is the current report of the World Bank, the way it is done is, they only look at 2 cities in a large country like India. And it happens in India, it is Delhi and Mumbai because of the large size. They only go purely by size. So as you know, Delhi and Mumbai only represent a part of India, not all of India. So as this exercise has been done in all the states, it makes it very interesting and much more useful as a piece of information to actually look at each state individually and also therefore to look at India collectively. And to your second part of the question, what do we see going forward? I think that more states will start to use this as a criteria to create more and more reform and more improvement within the states as we move forward.
Come on that, Mr. Kant, because would you concede that it's no longer about facilitating ease of doing business in India, which is what the central government can do, but states are big stakeholders? Is this entire exercise meant to improve the efficiency at state level, and how does one really attract investments overall at a federal level?
I think the key thing is that unless you're not an easy and a simple place to do business in, unless you don't improve your ability to give construction permit, starting permits, unless you don't allow easy electricity connection, unless your labor laws are not smooth, it will be very, very difficult to attract investment. And what this study by World Bank does is it closely shows the analysis between investment and ease of doing business. And those states will do well, which have a very good atmosphere on ease of doing business.
What we are also seeing, Mr. Kant, is sort of competitive federalism. One state does a big investor summit, others follow suit. There is some competition going on. Even as it takes shape, don't you fear that pockets of India may be over-industrialized and the rest of the country left underdeveloped?
No, I don't think so at all. A study of this kind brings out is that every state must compete, and states must decide whether they want to be easy on doing business in industries or in travel and tourism, whatever their competency is, whatever area they are good on, and whichever area they are fairly advanced in, they must excel in. They must make it easier for that particular sector to do business in.
But Mr. Munjal, I want you to be candid here at this point in time. Does this not all boil down to the political will and the political appetite for reforms, really?
Of course it is. As you see, the leadership in the states is always run by political leadership, and in a democracy like ours, the governments are run by political parties who are able to make the big moves or not make the big moves in some cases. And the bureaucracy is led by the leadership, by the political parties. But eventually the result is collective of government, industry, civil society working together in one aligned move to push forward the entire nation. And I think that's where the focus needs to be.
Mr. Munjal, you know, we've spoken in the past about this, and I want to ask you this question, specifically important today. You know, at the core of all of this ease of doing business is really the crucial reforms in the land space, in the labor space, and both haven't really taken off at the central level, and not too many states have bitten the bullet, so to say. In the absence of all of this, do you believe what we see today is merely cosmetic changes and may not go a long way in really wooing the top dollar?
So first, land and labor reform are very, very important, very critical, but they're not the only reforms. And what we see has happened in India in recent times makes it clear that the main action has to be at the state governments and not only at the center. In the early days of reform, in the early 19s, most of the work was being done at the central government level. It is clear now that now the action has moved down and most of the work will happen in states. So those states which are able to make these changes quicker, faster and more efficiently will certainly gain from more economic activity, increased investment, and which is what each state wants. So which is why we were talking of competitive federalism, that here is an opportunity for different states to demonstrate how they become a more attractive place for enterprise, for investments, for people to create new jobs, an environment where they can flourish and grow.
Right. You know, Mr. Kant, let me have the last word. At the core, what will improve ease of doing business is land and labor reform, and we have seen very little action on both. In fact, we moved forward and then moved several steps back on land. In the absence of these reforms, are all the changes merely cosmetic?
States will have to drive both. I mean, the many changes, many radical changes states have made. States like Jharkhand have got 100 out of 100 in labor laws. I mean, they've made radical changes in labor. So the important thing is that states will have to become the champion. They must out-excel the central government. If they do better than the central government, India will grow. And therefore, land and labor must become the agenda of the state government rather than of the central government, to my mind. And I think if that momentum continues, if that is sustained, India will become a very easy and simple place to do business in.
One could argue that you're passing the buck to states and land and labor reforms, but out of time. Thanks for joining in with that perspective, Mr. Kant. Mr. Munjal, appreciate you joining us on Business Tonight.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.